All right, everybody, we're going to get ready to get started. So this is our 10th year. So we reached a little bit of a milestone here, a little anniversary. So I know there's plenty of people in this room tonight that were part of the first flight night when we had about 265 people with John Cooper and David Fulcher. And over the last 8 years, the events continued to grow. And from everything that I hear back from everybody, says it's one of the best such events in the city. So it's not just on us, it's on all of you. So thank you. You'll see that in the program. You'll see it on the video screens that we really do want to thank. There's a lot of people, so I'm not going to get into a lot of individuality here, but it's a lot of sponsors, it's a lot of donors, it's coaches, it's administration, and most importantly, it's the volunteers that are on the executive board of the boosters with me. And that's our president, Laura Dominique, our treasurer, Dara Naylor, our vice president, Brian Yee, who does a lot of our advertising, Penny Clemens, who does our concessions, our secretary, Julie Klink, and then we also have Justin Bunnell, who puts on one hell of a craft show, if you've ever been there. So we have a great team that's been, putting a lot of good things in place here. There's some other announcements that I do want to touch upon real quick. First of all, I'd like to thank our special guests, Marty and Amanda Brennaman, for agreeing to be here tonight. They've been spending, I don't know how many past days in Arizona, but it's been a few, more than a few, and they flew back late last night to be here today, and they're flying back to Arizona tomorrow. So can't thank them enough. They've been great these past several weeks in getting prepared for this. So I told you, Marty, that it's something we've been wanting to have you here for a while, and the month of March was never good. So I'm probably the happiest guy other than you and Amanda that you retired. So thank you very much. I do want to give a shout out to our former president, Dave Miranda, who I know is in the house at the Board of Education table. And congratulations to him on his recent win and becoming part of the school board. So that's the happy stuff. I do have a couple sad announcements that if you thumb through your program, we had a couple very dear people to the boosters who have passed away recently, and I wanted to say a little something about both. Justin Bunnell's grandmother, Pat, since I came on board with the boosters 11, 12 years ago, Pat ran the craft show, and Pat ran the craft show her way. But she was great. The crafters loved her, and I think she put on one of the best ones here. And her grandson, Justin, is carrying on that tradition. And together with this event, they are major, major fundraisers for our organization. So for those who have either taken a booth or attended the craft show, we have Pat to thank for what that has become. And that has become an event that is 360 booths strong with a waiting list of over 130 to get in. That's how good our craft show is. So I know there's several people that knew Pat well, and we're going to miss her dearly. Also, on Christmas Day, my friend Gene Ackerman passed away. And I knew Gene pretty well. We had a lot of long talks. Whenever I would go to see her and talk about the state of Milford athletics or whatever, those conversations were never short. Because Jean was another one, boy, she had her opinions, and I did really enjoy talking with her about Milford schools, the foundation, and everything that she was a part of. And I sent her a text wishing her a Merry Christmas because I know how much she was into that day. And I found it shocking that I never got a text back until I found out that she had passed. So to her husband, Don, and to Tim Ackerman and the rest of the family, because I know they're both here tonight. She meant a lot to all of us, and we're going to miss her, and we're sorry for your loss. So on that note, we'll go ahead and do this. I don't know if there is anybody here from the Milford Schools Foundation board. If they are here, please raise your hand. There is somebody in the back. Can you come on up here, please? No? Well, then I'm going to call out her son, Tim, if Tim is here. The Boosters has a, we've done this in the past. We have given, something back. And in honor of Jean, we wanted to donate $500 from tonight's event to the Milford Schools Foundation in her name. So, I don't know. There he comes. Here he comes. He gets the big Price is Right check tonight. You take that, and thanks again. All right. I'll wrap this up. Thanks to, obviously my wife, who puts up with a lot of stressful nights getting ready for this. Very dear sponsors. Doug Smithson, Dr. Noyes, Al Ducker, Ron Burke. These are the contact people. The Drescher family, Tom Seaman at By Gollies. I mean, there are just so many great people that help keep this event being what it is. And I know he doesn't like it when I do this, but Jason Madden at Worldwide Graphics takes care of all of our programs, all of our tickets, our banners, all this great collateral material that helps make this event what it is. So again, if you guys need t-shirts or anything printed, please reach out to Jason and see if he can at least take care of you. And I do have one other special announcement. I've been told that if you buy a hoop, swing set, or trampoline anytime during the month of March at Recreations Outlet, and the Reds win the World Series, you get a 100% refund. So I think there's a little confidence in how the Reds are going to do this year. So again, 10 years, we've had a lot of great speakers. And after having Johnny and Pete and Joe, we're going to have a guy here tonight who spent a lot of time hanging with those guys. So I know we're going to get a lot of great stories. So I got a couple other announcements. We're going to have Aaron Zupka, our new athletic director, come up and give just a brief kind of thing where we are with Milford Athletics right now. And after that, we have a special guest from the Reds Hall of Fame Museum, Rick Walls. So I'll turn the mic over here to Aaron for a few minutes, and then we'll get on with things.
Do I get 45 minutes like Marty does? Only 45 seconds. All right, good evening, everybody. First, I want to thank everybody for being here. First of all, it's an honor and privilege to serve in this great district and community of Milford. I want to say thank you, obviously, to Todd for the tremendous amount of work and the behind-the-scenes stuff that he does to make this possible, and all of our boosters, volunteers, coaches, and all the supporters here. Also want to thank Superintendent Nancy House and the administration for being here tonight. It's great to have their support and the many other building administrators there. My job tonight is give you just a quick view of our Milford Athletics this year and what's going on with our student athletes. So I will be brief, I promise. One thing we've really tried to do is have a priority on modernization and showing, real-time updates for our teams using social media and a lot of technology. So hopefully, if you haven't yet, follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and other sources there. Some highlights this year. First of all, our boys soccer team. That's how I started my first year. We had an Elite 8 run there, won the first district title since 2011, and made the regional finals the first time since 2008. Lost to a really tough St. Ignatius team, won the state champion, and was loaded with talent, but an awesome job by our guys there. Do we have any cheerleaders in the house? Comp cheer team, anybody in the house tonight? I know they're back there somewhere. Our cheerleaders, no surprise, won their 5th straight ECC championship, cleaned house, and then went to Orlando there shortly after in February, won their 2nd straight national title. So that was a phenomenal job for them. Also want to shout out our unified cheerleading team. Some of our special needs cheerleaders competed in the state championship recently and performed exceptionally. So we're very thrilled by their performance and what they've contributed. So congratulations to them. We also had 2 state swimming qualifiers. This was recently in Canton, Ohio. We had freshman Aaron Fentress and sophomore Evan Fentress. They're siblings, if you didn't know that. Aaron was the first female individual swimmer since 1996 that qualified. So that was 24 years ago. So imagine where you were in 1996. That's how long it's been. Also want to give a shout out to our wrestling team. They have 6 district qualifiers tomorrow at Trent Arena. Good luck to them. But also want to shout out to Angel Dominguez. There's a big movement in female wrestlers right now. She went to the first ever all-women's state tournament and placed 5th overall. So shout out to Angel and what she's doing for females in sports. Phenomenal job. Also want to announce we have a new partnership. I know there's some folks from ProForce. That's our new strength and conditioning partner. Also a partnership with Cincinnati Sports Nation. If you haven't been there, it's behind Meyer, a phenomenal first-class facility. They have a lot of different programs and leagues for kids and adults. So we are entering in a partnership with them for sports performance, opening the door, additional space, resources, and their professionalism for our student athletes. They train a lot of professional athletes there, so we're lucky to have that new partnership there. So thank you to Ted and Kevin and the wonderful people at ProForce and Cincinnati Sports Nation for being with us. Also want to shout out our student section, the Flock. We got nominated by the Ohio High School Athletic Association for a Golden Megaphone finalist. This is the award going to one of the best student sections in the state of Ohio. So we're going up there in a couple weeks at the state semifinal games, and we're hoping to bring that home. So kudos to the Flock for all their support this year. The last couple things I'll say, the ECC is transforming right now. The Eastern Cincinnati Conference, we're going to 10 teams. Little Miami, Lebanon, and Winton Woods will be joining us. So this is quite a time with expansion and opportunities for our kids. Overall this year, I know spring's just started, we have served 7th through 12th grade, 1,090 student athletes in 26 sports and 80-plus teams. So think about the work we're doing, the scope of work we're doing is truly remarkable. We also just started esports. Mr. Yeager's over there. Shout out to Mr. Yeager and his esports team. That's the next thing coming up. So I'll leave you with this. As I wrap up, this is really a critical time for Milford Athletics. We know we have some facility and potential upgrades we need to compete with other schools in our league. But the event here tonight really goes a long way to making that possible. We have preliminary plans for a second turf at Charity Lucas to make that a multi-purpose facility. So there's a lot of projects like this. So the time is now to step up and help. If you give your time, talents, and financial contributions, this is a great time to get involved. So enjoy tonight, have fun, spend like there's no tomorrow, and remember the reason you're here, our student athletes. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Okay, so next up, I'm going to call up, he's one of our own. He lives here in Milford. The director of the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame Museum. They were kind enough to bring a display of stuff, so if you haven't had a chance to check it out, go over and see Perry over there. I know that on the tables there's a buy one, get one admission. If you have never been to the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame Museum, it is regarded as probably the best team museum in the country. So if you're down there to take in a game, make some time and take advantage of that ticket and go back and take a look at Reds history. So here's Rick Walls.
Thanks, Todd. Hall of Fame, we really appreciate being here today and being part of such an important occasion with a great cause. As a Milford resident, as Todd said, and kids that are in the system and knowing personally the importance of athletics and how they play a role in youth development, we know the fields are one of our greatest classrooms. It's really a pleasure to be here, especially when I'm in the house in the same room with our 2020 Hall of Fame inductee and your keynote speaker, Marty Brennaman. So it's really special tonight. As you guys know, many businesses, colleges, universities, other professional teams will have a Hall of Fame, but none of them can boast what we have in the Reds Hall of Fame and Museum. It's a 15,000 square foot facility respected throughout the museum industry as one of the best, if not the best of its kind. So when you think of Reds history in 150 years of baseball, we've got a lot to cover. By far, we are the largest and most active Hall of Fame in all of baseball. And just last year, the museum underwent a comprehensive renovation, basically a total reinvention of the museum, so that we could better tell the story of Reds history. With over 7,000 artifacts on display, the museum serves as a base of operations for a lot of programs and initiatives that support our mission to celebrate greatness, preserve history, and provide inspiration. The museum enthusiastically covers all the ballpark tours down at Great American Ballpark. We have a Legends Remembered Seniors program. We do the historical markers and statues that you see down around the ballpark. We run Reds Fantasy Camp. We have a membership program, which you can find out more information over here at our table about, and a chapter network all over Reds country. We have an 1869 Red Stockings vintage baseball team that would gladly make an appearance for you and help you with a fundraiser, and education programs that reach over 20,000 kids each year using baseball as the fuel for learning. So over these 150 years, the Reds, as you know, have developed a brand that is virtually synonymous with Cincinnati and the region. So during last year, in the 150th anniversary season, we saw the Reds through a wide lens that ultimately proved that we all have one thing in common, and that the thread that weaved through everything was you, the baseball fans, and people like Marty Brennaman, who connected the Reds to you and to the game. Reds baseball is most definitely a family of fans, a family of people who know there's something bigger than the everyday wins and losses. They see and understand the collective result of wins on and off the field. And we know the ones off the field are just as important. And Cincinnati Reds baseball has many of these wins throughout Reds country that are immeasurable. The Reds have opened the door and really given you the welcome mat for you to become and stay a Reds fan. I know that most of you would like to go to more games, if that were possible, but if you can't, you've always had the radio and the constancy of that voice for 46 years, almost a third of the entire history of the Reds organization, Marty Brennaman, to open that door for you and bring the Reds into your home, into your backyard, maybe to your transistor radio in your bedroom or in your car, to make you feel as though you were at the game, part of that team, part of the Reds family. Now that door remains open as we move into optimism, with optimism, into the 2020 season. It'll be the 151st year since that first family of Reds, those 1869 Red Stockings, that created the professional brand of baseball that we know and love today. This year is special because on April 26th, the Reds Hall of Fame family will grow by one when Marty Brennaman is inducted during pregame ceremonies and further celebrated that evening at a 1,500-seat dinner at the Duke Energy Convention Center, where the entire Reds organization will be there, the current roster, and lots of Hall of Famers from the past. It's an event you'll want to be at. So keep that date marked down. We look forward to this, and if you can't make it to one of those ceremonies, please come down to the Hall of Fame and support Marty's induction in another way. Now, I'm going to leave you with one feeling that as you think about baseball this year and as the spring brings, you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit here. But imagine the warmth of the sunrise, the smell and spring air, and the anticipation of going to a Reds game. Well, that's because it's game day. Whether it be Crosley Field, Riverfront Stadium, Synergy Field, or Great American Ballpark, you've been there, you felt it, you know what I'm talking about. That inner child, that inner baseball player, the competitive spirit that simmers inside you, there's something distinct about that feeling, like you were part of something special, and that something might just happen to be happening that day that's historic and memorable. That's where the baseball experience begins. So you're going to put on your favorite Reds gear. You're going to make your way to the ballpark, find a parking space. Hopefully, the sounds of the ballpark will be in range. The vendors, the ticket takers, the concession stands, program sellers. Your tickets are scanned, right? Not punched, on your phone probably now. There's no longer turnstiles to pass through, but you'll probably have to go through security. Perhaps the bobblehead day. Maybe you're going to grab a souvenir. As you approach the field, you're going to see the immaculately manicured green grass the scoreboard, the enormity of the ballpark, the people that have arrived for the same reason that you have, while you know inside that their feeling is a little bit different than yours because yours is unique, and that's because every person at the game has a different connection to Reds baseball. The teams are introduced, music plays, the first pitch, there's a roar of the crowd, a great defensive play, trip to the concession stand, and of course, the restroom. There's a double, a stolen base, the Reds score, check your phone. That's today's game, right? Text, maybe a photograph for a memory. Between inning activities, the seventh inning stretch comes along. There's a strikeout. Free pizza probably, right? Free pizza. And then the Reds come to bat in the bottom of the ninth, down a run, and up to the plate steps a Red, a blast into the moon deck, a walk-off, fireworks, and if by chance you aren't at the ballpark and you're in your car, you're going to hear it on the radio, those immortal words, the ones that we will miss forever, and this one belongs to the Reds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so now our Master of Ceremonies joining us, I believe, for the 4th year. And I know when I first reached out to him, it was just, didn't know, but Doc and I now spend a lot of time together, chatting sports, smoking cigars, drinking some fine bourbon. So glad to have him back. My favorite sports columnist, Mr. Paul Doherty.
Good evening. I missed you last year. I forgot totally about it. I'm surprised Todd is still my friend, but for better or worse, I am here tonight. And I'd just like to let you know that it has already started. Now, if you don't know Marty Brennaman very well, you're lucky, but if you do know him very well, you know that he tends to heckle people. Todd just got done saying how he and I spend a lot of time together. Marty immediately allowed that, yeah, Doc spends a lot of time with a lot of people other than his wife. Thank you, Marty. Just remember who has the microphone right now. I did not know Amanda Ingram when she met Marty Brennaman. I didn't know her when she married Marty Brennaman. I only know that when she did, I said to myself, you gotta be out of your mind. I said a prayer for Amanda, lit a few candles, did that cross thing that people do, and evidently it worked out because they're still together, which I give Amanda full credit for. And she'll be up here in a minute to tell you how she has managed to put up with that guy for as long as she has. Truly deserving of a medal. They married more than a decade ago, and I will tell you that the changes that she made in my friend Marty, huge, just huge, and all for the better. Before Amanda got a hold of Marty, Marty was cranky, caustic, cocky, dismissive, curmudgeonly, argumentative, critical, churlish, feisty, disparaging, kingly, vain, and loud. Now he's not loud. Amanda dresses Marty. See, you're gonna have fun tonight, big boy. No more white New Balance sneakers for Franchester Martin Brennaman. By the way, I'm wearing white sneakers that might or might not be New Balance, Amanda. No more blue jeans with what Amanda said were 9-inch zippers. Now, we're all adults here, and this is a family outing, and I have no idea what jeans with 9-inch zippers look like, but it can't be good. Before Amanda, Marty spent his free time working on his tan and spraying his hair. Let's be honest. On the road with the Reds, the only sightseeing he ever did was to hang out by the hotel pool, read paperback novels, and look at women wearing bikinis. Amanda introduced Marty to the world, quite literally. And actually, they're a lot alike. Big personalities, big wills, considerable tempers, but also the ability to kiss and make up and never hold a grudge. One way they differed was in their willingness to adventure, to travel. Amanda lived for it. Marty was very happy to live without it. There was one occasion before they got married that almost ended them before they'd begun. And I'll be happy to tell you about that. First year together, Goodyear, Arizona, spring training. Marty gets a day or two off in spring training. Amanda decided they should take a train from someplace called Williams, Arizona, I have no idea where that is, to the Grand Canyon, which to me sounds like a hell of an idea. Not to Marty. Amanda said, let's go. Marty said no. Actually, Marty probably didn't say it exactly like that. Marty might have said, I'd rather see two dogs cozying up to one another than to take a train to the Grand Canyon. Well, this went on for a few days. Amanda kept trying. Marty kept resisting. Finally, Amanda, to her everlasting credit, said, all right, I'm taking the train to the Grand Canyon. I'm going to go for the day. I'm going to take the train back, and I'm going to get on that plane. I'm flying straight back to Cincinnati, and hell with you. Marty's not used to people speaking to him that way. Marty went to the Grand Canyon. Good for you, Amanda. And he liked it. Sort of like a green eggs and ham kind of deal. He liked it. They've traveled the world ever since, literally. I wish I had your itinerary. I wish I had your time to have your itinerary. Overseas last summer, just recently, fresh off a trip down the west coast of Oregon and California. I told you not to go down US 1 South. Have you ever been on US 1 South, maybe north of San Francisco for about 180 miles? There ain't nothing between you and the Pacific Ocean except about a 200-foot cliff. I said, don't do that, Marty. Don't travel that road. But they did. He hated it, but they survived it. They were born on the same day on the calendar. Exact same day. Not the same year. Amanda's considerably older than Marty. Neither of them suffers fools. Amanda is very impatient. And they got it in their heads they wanted a dog just like Chris Welsh had. They couldn't wait more than a day. Amanda went from Goodyear, Arizona, out to California where she found a dog and brought it back. Same day. Millie. Millie, who Marty rides in a baby stroller. That's a true story. We'll elaborate on that later. There's kind of an open debate as to what attracted them to each other. We know when they met, Amanda was a rep for Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark wanted, and the Reds wanted Marty and Joe on a commemorative bottle. Amanda was the person who got that done. She said Marty had a presence that she liked. A presence. He was educated and well-spoken, and she learned. Pretty good human being. Marty had a shorter explanation for his attraction to Amanda. She was hot. Now they're hardly apart. If you ever look at Amanda's Facebook page, they're there like every 3 hours. New stuff. I refer to Amanda now as the staff photographer. Amanda has introduced Marty to some of life's finer pleasures. travel. They've been to the Tetons, the Yellowstone, the Oregon coast, the Grand Canyon, of course. Marty has introduced Amanda to, I don't really know, actually. Maybe nothing. Truthfully, though, they've shown a lot of us what real love really looks like. About that, I am not joking. Here to tell you more about all of it, Amanda Brennaman.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to take this out, too, because I like to kind of walk around. I'm not even sure I need to say anything else. Paul kind of said it all. But what I was going to talk about is how did a girl from Ashland, Kentucky, which is in the heart of Reds country, by the way, about 2.5 hours southeast of here, grow up to become Amanda Brennaman. I was a fan, just like probably a lot of you are out there, and I knew who Marty Brennaman was from the time I knew what a baseball was. I was born in 1972 on July 28th. Marty was born July 28th, 1942, so we're 30 years apart to the day. So I certainly didn't grow up thinking, man, one day I'm going to marry him, right? But I was taught very early the importance of sports. And growing up in the 70s, you know, it was a big red machine. And for me, in Ashland, Kentucky, it was a steel curtain. So I had two really great teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Reds. I know, sorry. I live in Cincinnati now, so I don't hate the Bengals anymore. No, but seriously, my parents would make me come in and watch big games on TV. Like, you need to know what's going on. I would listen to the radio with them. So I was that kid growing up with the transistor radio, listening to Marty and Joe call baseball games, just like so many of you did. Fast forward all these years, how did we even meet? I get asked that a lot, honestly. And I've been down the road of matrimonial bliss as well. Marty and I both share some strikeouts in the marriage department. But because of all that, I was kind of willing to take a chance. And so I left Ashland, Kentucky, and I'd gotten divorced. And, you know, I'd been to school, I've done all those right kind of things, and I'm like, now what's next? So I ended up in Louisville, Kentucky, Oldham County to be exact, and I was head of their economic development department down there, and met all these great people, and realized, you know what, you can leave Ashland, Kentucky, and still be okay, because nobody in my family had ever left home. We all lived in the same hometown. So I moved to Louisville and decided that there were still greater things out there. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was a lobbyist up there for a number of years. And the one thing that tied me back home, frankly, was sports, was Reds baseball, at the time, Kentucky basketball. And again, listening to Marty, having that connection with the Reds through the radio, because you know you could pick it up a little bit in Washington D.C. back then. So I knew what was going on. I would check the box scores. I would check the standings. Again, very aware of what's going on with Cincinnati sports. My sister had a baby while I was in D.C., and I wanted to come back home. I wanted to be back in Louisville. She'd moved to Louisville. And I went to work for a company called Maker's Mark Bourbon, which I think a lot of you guys probably are familiar with. I see some grins and laughs. So I go to work for Maker's Mark, and one of my jobs is Kentucky PR. That's my very first job with Maker's. So my job was to come up with celebrities to put on these little local bottles that we did in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. And again, being the sports fan, my first bottle was Johnny Bench. I mean, who doesn't love Johnny Bench, right? So that was a way to kind of start the process of becoming more involved with sports. Again, I loved it my whole life. My next bottle, we had to do another bottle. It was a huge success. After Johnny Bench, I think we did the 1990 World Series team, and we had Chris Sabo and Eric Davis, I think, was a part of that. And then the next year, I'm like, you know what, we're missing kind of the main red, in my opinion, and that was Marty and Joe. Joe was still alive then. And that's how Marty and I met. I was taken up to the radio booth by a mutual friend of ours at the time, and I gave him my business card, and he said, like, I'll call you sometime. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And he never did. And again, no way, shape, or form was I thinking anything about, anything like that. But we put him on a bottle of Maker's Mark, and he came down to Louisville, and we shot some B-roll footage, and there was just sort of kind of a click. But I thought, this is weird. He's older than my dad, frankly. But I did think at the time, well, at least he's not drawing Social Security. At least he's not old enough to draw a Social Security check. So maybe this is okay. And frankly, after the bottle was done and we signed these bottles at Turfway Park, he kept calling me. And I'm like, why does he keep calling me? And I'm not sure when it was exactly. He had to come back for something, and I happened to be somewhere, and I ended up having dinner with just Marty Brennaman. And I remember thinking, this is weird, right? This is a guy I grew up listening to. What am I doing? I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my parents, and we just kind of went on about how things were. And my job at the time then, I was director of field marketing for Maker's Mark. So I traveled all over the country representing makers. I had 20 folks that worked for me in all of our big markets, from New York to Seattle to Chicago and every point in between. And I found myself booking my work trips based upon a Reds baseball schedule. So if the Reds were playing the Nationals, Amanda had a meeting in Washington, D.C. If the Reds were playing the Cubs, we went to Chicago, and so on and so on and so on. And that brings us to pretty much to today, with lots and lots of bumps along the way. But I couldn't be more proud to be here tonight as his wife. It's been one heck of a journey. I wouldn't change one single thing about my life. I couldn't script it any better. From a kid growing up in small town Kentucky to being Marty Brennaman's wife, living in Cincinnati, Ohio, with all these great folks and so many Reds fans, and to see all you guys come up to him and share stories. I was that fan. I know. I get it. So don't ever think you're bothering us. Don't ever think you're putting us out in any way. I love hearing it. I totally understand it. And we've had a great time. We really have. We've shared some unbelievable memories on baseball trips, and now we get to do all that kind of sort of over again, start that next chapter of our life with him being retired. And I have to tell you personally, people ask him all the time, how's retirement? I love it. He loves it. Everything's great. He's not missing things. For me, it's different because I'm also a fan. And baseball now is, I still love the game. I'll always love the game, but it's not personal anymore. I was one of the only people in the whole stadium, whether it was 50,000 people there or there was 5,000 people there. I had my earphones in, and I was listening to my husband. And I was really proud of that. And it was really a connection that not many folks ever get to have. And that's gone for me now. And I'm thrilled for us. I'm thrilled for Amanda and Marty, man and wife, couple, going together. But as a fan, I'm really going to miss him. With that being said, I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. I can't imagine being more proud to be his wife. And thank God every day that it's led us to this point, and look forward to the next however many years God gives us together on this earth. Thank you all very much for having me.
Okay, we're ready to get back to things here as we're like 10 till 9. So whatever you're in the middle of, if you can get to wrapping it up, and unless you're buying tickets or putting a bid in on something, if you're spending money, go ahead and stay over there and do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up our master of ceremonies, Mr. Paul Doherty. He's going to do a little introduction of our featured speaker. My guys in the back, ready to go when Doc is done. I hope we're ready to go. So everybody, here's Paul Doherty.
I get to do this twice. How about that? Thanks again for coming. This is a great event. I think this is the 4th time I've done it. It gets bigger and better every year. Todd is a master at running this stuff. How about a big hand for Todd Moore? Thank you, Todd. Okay. I'm going to say a few things now that may end a beautiful friendship between Marty Brennaman and myself. I'm going to begin it by saying I loved the banana phone. You guys like the banana phone? I loved the banana phone. I was in mourning for weeks when they took it off the air because I knew that Marty was, shall we say, not the biggest fan of the BP. And I had vowed for maybe a decade to call the banana phone and pretend to be a fan. And I'm really sad that I didn't do it. It would have gone something like this. You're on with Marty Brennaman. I love you, Marty. Thank you. You remember me? I met you in 1984 at the BP in Shernville. Oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you were great. You was buying some beef jerky and some dog food. Yes, I was. Yes, I was. And I never did it. I never did it. And then the banana phone left, and it never got reinstated, to Marty's everlasting joy and my sorrow. So one more time, wherever he is, I love you, Marty. Let me tell you a few things about Marty that he would never tell you about himself. He's a recovering mall walker. Can you imagine? The great Marty Brennaman, Hall of Famer, the Famer himself, the guy who never took an ounce of crap from a player, manager, anybody, and he knew the distance between Auntie Anne's and the GameStop. Marty shops at Steinmart, or at least he used to. Do you allow him anymore, Amanda? It's okay? No white New Balance at Steinmart. I shop at Steinmart. Pretty proud of that. Marty cheats at golf. The guy who got the package to play golf with Marty at TPC, he'll find out. I recommend, if you want to get on his good side, bring an extra bag of tees so whenever Marty hits the ball in the rough, he's got a little help. Forever asking Marty if he'd like me to tee it up for him when he's in the rough. Marty likes free stuff. We all like free stuff, but Marty's a rich guy. He likes free golf balls, free golf trips via private plane from San Francisco to Pebble Beach. We have a nickname for Marty in the local media business. We like to call Marty America's guest. As I said before, Marty takes his dog in a dog stroller. No lie. It's like a baby stroller, only for a dog. You probably never knew that about Marty Brennaman. I never knew that about Marty Brennaman. I think that's pretty funny. Also shameful. I've never seen Marty in a pair of shorts. Bad legs. I've never seen Marty in a baseball hat. I mean, back in the day, that was understandable with the poofy-haired thing going on. Couldn't take that chance. But I do know the guy who has never passed on a chance to help a young broadcaster. I'm being serious now. Marty has done more good things for more people in the broadcast business than anybody. You don't know that because he doesn't talk about it. I also know Marty as the guy who cut all that hair off, which was an absolutely amazing feat. And it took about 6 years, I think, to benefit the Dragonfly Foundation. I don't know if a lot of you know what the Dragonfly Foundation is. And he remains one of that charity's biggest supporters. The Dragonfly Foundation fights pediatric cancer. And I remember Marty saying that having his hair cut off to benefit that foundation was the most important night he'd ever spent at Great American Ballpark. I know that guy. But mostly I'm like all of you. I know my friend best from his radio broadcasts, which I will miss until the day I die. Baseball is summer, and baseball on the radio is summer's voice. Night after week after month, I could have any number of things going wrong in my life, but I'd know that between April and October, I'd always have Marty on the radio. Informative, prepared, entertaining, never afraid to challenge the team that paid him. Marty never insulted my intelligence. He never told it like it wasn't. I'll still listen to the Reds on the radio, probably more than he will, world traveler that he is. He'll be off somewhere living the dreams that he deserves with the woman who has made them all possible. Good for him. Ladies and gentlemen, Marty Brennaman. And we're supposed to have a video. I messed that up, Todd. Sorry.
Lopez, a swing and a 3-1 ball game. I mean, way back in right field. Did that ball go completely over the bank of bleachers? And right it did. Juan Francisco has hit one of the longest home runs ever hit in this ballpark, going completely over the moon deck in right field. A young man racing up the aisle now and looking out toward the river and Mering Way, which is behind the ballpark. It was amazing the reaction of the fans in the park. Those people out in right field were all up and prepared for a possible souvenir, and Francisco had longer thoughts in mind than that. Here's the stretch, and here's the 2-2 pitch. And a high fly ball way back in center field. It is out of here. A grand slam home run for Joey Votto. And this one belongs to the Reds. Absolutely amazing. A 2-2 pitch and he drives up on the grass in center field. It caps off a dramatic finish to this Mother's Day game at Great American Ballpark. His third home run of the game, and the Reds have rallied here in the ninth inning to win this game 9-6. What a finish. Joey Votto's second career grand slam, and it couldn't have come in a more dramatic fashion. 3 home runs, 4 hits on the day, and the Reds win one for the ages. The pitch. And a high drive, hit back into deep right field. Junior has just knocked the door down to the 500 club. A high drive into the lower deck and right. Number 30 touches them all, and boy, what a Father's Day gift for Senior. The dugout empties as he rounds third, getting the glad hand from Mark Berry. Greeted at home plate by Adam Dunn, now Jason LaRue, followed by by Sean Casey, and each of them will get a piece of Ken Griffey Jr. before he gets back into the dugout, hitting his 500th home run to right field. Leading off this 6th inning, and last but not least, manager Dave Miley. And now Junior running down toward the area where his mom and dad sit, and he is there with his father for a big Father's Day hug. What a scene this is here at Busch Stadium in St. Louis.
Outfield shaded around toward left for Aaron. Dillingham with a pause, the 3-1 pitch. Swung on, long shot, into deep left field. Rose is back, and that ball is gone. A home run. Henry Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth's home run record of 714 with a clout over the 375 marker in left field. The Braves are piling out of the dugout. The crowd is on its feet in mass here at Riverfront Stadium as Hank Aaron has just hammered a 3-1 pitch from Jack Dillingham over the left field wall, and the Braves are out front 3-0.
A strike away, working to Don Slaught with a 2-2 pitch. Here it comes, and he struck him out swinging. And the 1990 National League Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. John up there with the bases loaded, the outfield deep and around toward right, and the 1-0 on the way to the plate. Swung on, long drive, right field, and this one belongs to the Reds. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Adam Dunn with a streaming line drive into the Cleveland bullpen in right field, and the Reds have done what appeared to be the impossible. His teammates are waiting on him. Jerry Narron is out of the dugout banging his hands together. Adam Dunn with a 9th inning 2-out grand slam home run. What a finish at Great American Ballpark. The pitch is hit in the air, foul, off first. Benzinger backing and calling. And the 1990 World Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. The Cincinnati Reds have done the absolute improbable by defeating the club considered to be the best in Major League Baseball, and they've done it in a 4-game series sweep. He is ready for the 2-2 to Woodson, and here it comes. And it is swung out and missed. And Tom Browning has pitched a perfect game. 27 outs in a row, and he is being mobbed by his teammates just to the third base side of the mound. A perfect game thrown by Tom Browning on this Friday night, September the 16th, 1988. As he no-hits the Los Angeles Dodgers 1-0 and throws the first perfect game in the long and legendary history of this great Cincinnati Reds baseball franchise. And now Browning being hoisted to the shoulders of his teammates. And boy, what a memorable scene on a wet, dreary evening here in Cincinnati. A night that the fans had to wait 2 hours and 27 minutes for, and brother, was the wait worthwhile. And this one belongs to the Reds. So here's Burdick, and here's Bruce. And a high fly ball, center field. He hit it a ton. It's gone. And the 2010 Central Division Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. Jay Bruce explodes the first pitch into the grass and straightaway center field. He is being mobbed by his teammates. They met him at home plate. They ran him up the first base foul line. They're approaching the mound. The bullpenners are coming out, and everybody's getting in on the celebration at the mound as the crowd roars here at Great American Ballpark. The first pitch, he rockets onto the lawn and straightaway center field. His 22nd home run of the season, and this one belongs to the Reds.
He levels the bat a couple of times. Shao kicks and he fires. Rose swings.
There it is! There it is! Get out! Get out! All right!
Hit number 4192. A line drive single into left center field. A clean base hit. And it is pandemonium here at Riverfront Stadium. The fireworks exploding overhead. The Cincinnati dugout has emptied. The applause continues unabated. Rose completely encircled by his teammates at first base. Bobby Brown of the San Diego Padres coming all the way from the third base dugout to personally congratulate Pete Rose. And the kind of outpouring of adulation that I don't think you'll ever see an athlete get any more of.
Cheers. Damn, that wore me out. I stand there and watch all that stuff. I can't believe that, you know, all of that is encapsulated into a 46-year period. And the most amazing thing to me is that 2 or 3 of them came with about 15 people in the ballpark. Honest to God. I mean, the Griffey 500th home run was big. And in my ranking of top 10, Griffey's home run would probably be second. And I'll tell you, there's a great story about that. But the 600th home run he hit in Miami, honest to God, there were maybe 400 people in the ballpark the night he hit it. And it was a big deal. And the only people cheering that home run was me. But the 500th home run, and you know, his dad and I were very good friends, and he was a part of the Big Red Machine. And when Junior came to the club in 2000, it was really funny because unbeknownst to me, and I found out after the fact, his dad came to him within 2 or 3 days after the trade was made, and his dad told him, he said, "You and Marty Brennaman will cross swords, and it won't take very long." But his old man was a great astute of human character, because during his first year there, in a game one afternoon at home, he had a ground ball to shortstop, and the shortstop kicked the ball around for about 10 seconds, and he still had time to recover and pick it up and throw Griffey out because Junior was not running down the line. And I said on the radio he was loafing. So the next day, I walked through the clubhouse, and it was one of the perfect storms, because normally when the Reds are taking batting practice, everybody is out of the clubhouse. There's nobody in the clubhouse. But this particular day, everybody was out of the clubhouse with the exception of Junior, and the writers were all in the clubhouse. They had no damn business being in the clubhouse, but they were there. So I walked through the clubhouse on my way to the field, and he was at his locker, and the writers were there, and he yelled at me. He said, "Hey, I heard what you said about me on the radio yesterday, and that was a bunch of BS." I said, "No, it wasn't." I said, "You loafed down the first baseline because the shortstop kicked the ball around for 5 or 6 seconds. He still had time to recover and throw you out. If you're running and not loafing, you beat that ball out." And so one thing led to another, and he and I got into a shouting match. And I used one of the worst lines I've ever had in my life. It's a damn good line, but it didn't look good in the paper the next day, because all the writers were there. They couldn't write fast enough. And my line was, "Look here, I was here before you got here, and I'll be here after you're gone." I was right what I said, but it didn't look good in the papers the next day. And so this thing went on for 3 or 4 days, and it finally died off like everything does. And the next spring, this is when the Reds were training in Sarasota, and they were playing a spring training game one day against the New York Yankees, and I'm standing around the batting cage. I'm talking to Alex Rodriguez. And all of a sudden, somebody put
a big bear hug on me from behind, and it was so tight that I couldn't turn around and look. And he finally let I turn around. It was Reggie Jackson. And he and I had never met before in my life. And he said, Mr. Brennaman, he said, I want to congratulate you for what you said about Ken Griffey Jr. last year. I said, why? He said, because nobody in the American League had the guts to say that. And he did it all the time. And so we're talking, and I'd never met him before. And during the course of the conversation, I said, boy, you look like $1 million. And his line was, yep, and I got it too. So now, out of that issue with Junior, brought us closer and closer and closer together, to the point where I think he had a different respect for me, and I certainly had a great respect for him. And so now, when he was approaching 500 home runs, he's got 498. And he comes to me in the clubhouse one day and he said, hey, we need to talk about something. And I said, okay. He said, when I hit my 500th home run, I want you to call it. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And I will be happy to call it as long as it's not in the 3rd, 4th, and 7th inning. And he said, no, you don't understand. I said, no, I do understand. I said, you don't understand. There's someone else who does the 3rd, 4th, and 7th inning, and I'm not going to take those innings away from him. I said, I got a pretty good ego, but I don't have an ego big enough to take that call away from somebody else if it happens in the innings that they are required to work. He said, no, you don't understand. I said, the hell I don't. So one thing led to another. And it finally got to Phil Castellini, who's the COO of the club. We had a sit-down meeting. And I said, Phil, I'm not doing this. He said, suppose the club puts out a release and says that this is Junior's request, and every at-bat he has, no matter what inning it comes in, you call that at-bat. I said, as long as the club makes it clear that this is not my request. He said, okay, so it took care of it. And fortunately, his home run against the Cardinals that you all saw up there, the 500th home run, came in St. Louis. So now we fast forward 3 more years. Now he's got 598. Comes to me one day and he said, hey, you and I got to talk. He said, I said, we ain't doing this again, are we? He said, yeah, we're doing it again. And fortunately, his 600th home run came in Miami before 313 people. So now, the day came that he was traded, and we flew from Los Angeles to Washington, and we played a Wednesday night game in LA, and we're flying to DC to play the Nationals. We have an off day on Thursday, and because of the time change, we get to the Mayflower Hotel in Washington at 5:15 in the morning, and everybody's wiped out. We're off on Thursday, begin the series on Friday night. And so in every hotel we go into, they have the keys and individual envelopes with your name on it. You pick up the envelope, you go to the elevator, you go to your room. And as fate would have it, he and I were thrown together on the same elevator. And there were a couple of coaches on there, but they got off before this was another perfect situation. And so he and I were the only ones on the elevator. And we get to his floor, and he starts off, and he turns around, and he sticks his hand out, and I instinctively shake his hand. He said, I want to thank you for the years that we spend together. I said, what are you talking about? He says, I've been traded to the Chicago White Sox. Well, he and I had this kind of relationship where we're jerking each other around all the time. I said, hey, pal, it's 5:30 in the morning. I said, you're tired, I'm tired. I'm not. So he shows me his phone. His agent, Brian Goldberg, had sent him a message saying, you have to approve the trade. And he did approve the trade. We all go to bed. I'm sitting on the biggest story of the year in baseball. And I get up at 11:30 in the morning, and now the story's all over the country that he had been traded. For the record, and people talk about Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr. was the greatest player in the decade of the 90s. Hands down, No contest. If you buy into the fact that Barry Bonds cheated by taking performance-enhancing drugs, which I do, Ken Griffey Jr. never did that. And so for people to get carried away and lose their friggin' minds and say that Bonds was a guy, that's not true. Ken Griffey Jr. was the greatest player in the decade of the 90s. And the only unfortunate thing we had about his 10-year run here in Cincinnati is he was only healthy for two or three of the years he was here. And when he was healthy, we saw what a great player he was. You know, it's hard to believe 46 years to have been a broadcaster at the big league level for a lot of reasons. One, I was smart enough to stay here when I had chances to leave. And I stayed here because I love this community. And it was a great place to raise kids. And people bought into my act here, and maybe they wouldn't buy into my act somewhere else. But every time I had a chance to leave, I always said no. And if you say no long enough, pretty soon, if there's a job open and the powers that be of whatever the club that was, they'd be sitting around saying, well, what about Brennaman in Cincinnati? And they'd say, no, there's no reason to call him because he ain't going anywhere. And that was a good thing for me. I like that. And so I was one of 8 guys that spent 40-plus years broadcasting big league baseball, and they did it for one team. And that was important to me. That was really, really important to me. Thank you. However, the biggest single reason was this town. And I've often felt that people who live somewhere else and came into this community to live had a better feel for what a great place this is to live as opposed to the people who were born and raised and lived here their entire lives. In 1976, the Sports Illustrated sent a writer into this town for the Reds had a 10-game homestand. And they sent this writer here with the intention of writing a story about how great this team was. That was a big old deal. Everybody knew how damn great this team was. But Sports Illustrated was going to say it for the first time. And they sent this guy in here, and he covered the whole homestand. And 2 weeks later, when the piece appeared, 75% of it dealt with the city of Cincinnati, and 25% of it dealt with how great this baseball team was. And that was an indication of the impact that this city had on that guy. So I don't care whether you're talking about 1977 or you're talking about 2000 and where we are, 10 or 8 now. There's no 2020. The situation remains the same. This is such a great place to live. Whether you're in Milford or you're in Indian Hill or you're in Madeira or Anderson Township or wherever you are, this is such a great place to live. And sometimes I don't think we really appreciate the good things that we have in this community. They talk about the breadbasket of the country. It doesn't get any better than this. This is where it's all about. And the other thing is, I think tonight I met every goddamn employee of Mike Castrucci Ford Automotive there is in the country. I'm not lying to you. I think I met every one of them. One of the great things that happened to me, maybe the single best thing that ever happened to me, was working with Joe Nuxhall. Give me a show of hands here. All right. There's a picture on this cover of this thing right here. That picture right there was taken on February 1st, 1974, at a photography studio in Dayton, Ohio. And that's the first night that I ever met Joe Nuxhall. And the first thing that I said to him when I was introduced to him was, I have your baseball card. And I did. And we had publicity shots taken in this photography studio in Dayton individually and together. And that began the run of 31 years in a row. And the longer we went, the closer we got. Both of us were left-handers. Both of us, as a result, were a little bit different. Because left-handers are different. I don't give a damn what they say. They're different. And so we drew even closer when I started to play golf in 1995, and we'd go on the road. By that time, I stopped running the streets and all that kind of stuff, so I cherish getting a good night's sleep at night. And so we'd go play golf, and we'd do a night game, then we'd come back to the hotel, we'd go to bed, we'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd go play golf, we'd be done by 11 or 11:30. Joe had to have a power nap before he went to the ballpark. And so that was the normal run of day for us. And as much as we played golf together, that's how close we got. But he and I were never the kind of guys that ever expressed how much the other meant to the other person. We were never that kind of people. And so as the years went by, and now Joe's health starts to fail, and we go into his last year as a broadcaster with the Reds, and we never acknowledged it. We never sat down and talked about the fact, this is it. 31 years. Nobody has ever surpassed that as a team in Major League Baseball. Vin Scully and Jerry Doggett worked 31 years together as Dodger broadcasters. Marty and Joe worked 31 years together as broadcasters for the Cincinnati Reds. We did not want to face the reality that this was it. So now the season goes by in the blink of an eye. And we get to the last game of the season. We go through the game just like any other game that he and I worked together. I mean, it was no different. And we get to the postseason, a post-game show. And then I said, after the game was over and we were wrapping up the game and wrapping up the season, and I said, I guess we have to talk about it. And he said, yeah, I guess we do. And I couldn't get through it. I mean, I've never been an emotional kind of guy. That's a good story too. But I used to kid Joe about being able to cry at the sun coming up, doors opening, whatever it may be. Anything like that, Joe would break out and cry. When Johnny Bench hit a home run on Johnny Bench night, Red got beat 5-1. Joe had the call. Joe broke down and cried. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, what in the hell is a big deal? I don't see the big deal. Well, the older you get, and it may not apply to everybody. Doctors, apply to you. It applies to me. I get very emotional about things today because I think a lot of that comes about because we consciously or subconsciously realize at varying degrees of age that we are no longer immortal. So the things that we do and the things that we say to people become important. Pete Rose and I never end a conversation without telling each other that we love the other one. Pete would not even know how to spell the word love 40 years ago. He would never utter that word, but today he does. Anyway, I couldn't get through it. And he said on the radio that day, you need some help, don't you, little buddy? That's what he used to call me. I said, yeah, I need some help. So we got through it. So now, a year or two goes by, Joe's health continues to fail. And we have a couple of guys that win the right to play golf with Joe and me at Kenwood Country Club in a fundraiser. And we go out there in 2007, and it was a early November day, and the day was perfect. It was 57 degrees, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And so Joe was not healthy well enough or strong enough to play 18 holes of golf. So I meet him in the parking lot at Kenwood. I get his clubs out of his van. I put him on the cart. We go around, and we start playing. And Joe, every now and then, will hit a golf shot. But he wasn't strong enough to play 18 holes. And so at the turn, I say to him, why don't you let me take you back to the van and go on back to your house in Fairfield and rest? He said, no, I've told these guys I was going to play, and I'm going to play. And he would tell stories, and nobody could tell a story like Joe Nuxhall or had had the recall of something that might have happened in 1958. And so we get to the 14th tee box, and we're sitting there in the golf cart, and he says to me, we really had a good time, didn't we? And I said, yep, we had a great time. And I'm convinced, because he died 4 days later, I'm convinced that he knew that day and that moment that we would never be together again. And I've got a picture in my house of he and I together, taken that day. And I went on a baseball cruise. The Reds have Provident Travel as a baseball cruise at 37, 38 years in a row. And I went the next weekend, and Joe was unable to go, obviously. And the second day out, I go to bed on the ship, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and my cell phone is there, and all it says was 911 from Rob Butcher, the Reds Media Relations Director. Well, I was half sleeping. It didn't impact me, and I sleep through the night, and I wake up the next morning, and I get a call from John Burns, who at that time, a buddy of mine who was with Cincinnati Bell, and he's talking to me, and the more he talks, the more I don't know what he's talking about. And finally, he senses it. He said, well, you don't know, do you? And I said, I don't know what. He said, Joe died last night at 11 o'clock. Well, I came home, and I went to the wake at Fairfield High School. And all of us work with a lot of people who are influential to us. There's no one in this room that worked with a person that was more influential toward me and my career and the way you handle success and the way you deal with people than he was. We used to get mail that was sent to the ballpark, and all the envelopes said was Marty and Joe, Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, what the hell is that? So I ran into one of the officials at the Cincinnati Post Office downtown one day. I said, what is this? I said, you got to be breaking some kind of federal law. He said, look, we know where that mail's supposed to go. And I think that's when I realized that he and I as a team had arrived. There were legendary stories about his temper. And he was a guy that would tell you that when he finally conquered and overcame his temper was when he had his most productive years in the major leagues. And if you go back and look at his records, and then all of a sudden you see an automatic increase over a 2 or 3 year period, you realize that he's telling you the truth. He had a legendary temper. And every now and then, if I jerked his chain a little bit, which I was good at, and I realized he was easy, it was not even any fun to jerk his chain because I could get him pissed off in a New York minute. But I never saw him when he was on top of his game as far as temper. One night, we played a game at Riverfront. The Reds had a 5-run lead in the top of the ninth against somebody. And when that case cropped up, he would pack his stuff up and he would go downstairs to do his famous Star of the Game show. So he gets in the elevator, this is in the 5th floor at Riverfront, to go down to the clubhouse level. And an elderly gentleman was running the elevator, and Eleanor Klazuski, Ted Klazuski's wife, was in the elevator with Joe. Well, the elevator stopped on the 2nd floor, and these 3 young, obviously inebriated guys started on to the elevator. And the gentleman running the elevator said, can I see your credentials? Everybody had credentials, and if you were there every day like Joe or me or some of the writers, they didn't need to see your credentials. They knew you were supposed to be there. But if they didn't recognize somebody, they would ask him to see the credential. And this one guy said, we don't have any, but I'm Paul Brown's son, the owner of the Bengals. And the gentleman very politely said, that's fine, but if you don't have the proper credentials, you can't get on the elevator. And the guy said to him, who in the hell are you? Well, at that point, Joe said, look,
Doesn't make any difference who he is. We have to go. You don't have the credentials, back off. So now the elevator door is closing, and in all the annals of timing in the history of the world, nobody had worse timing than this guy. Because he looked at Joe, and Joe had his scorebook in one hand and his briefcase in the other, and the guy looked Joe in the eye and said, "You son of a bitch." It was a bad idea. Joe dropped both of them. He got his hands in the elevator door. He parted them. He grabbed the guy by the shirt collar and lifted him up until his toes touched the ground. He said, "Now I told you to get out, and now I'm going to show you why you should have." And he threw him out of the door. I got this from Eleanor Klazuski, and she said he was so mad he was shaking. So I saw the one extreme of Joe, and then for one brief moment, I heard about the other extreme. But he was also one of the most naive people I've ever been around. And I'm going to tell you a story about it. We played a series in San Francisco one day. We had an engineer named Mike Marquardt who realized that Joe was easy. This is in 1977. Mike brings a videotape machine into Candlestick Park. Now, back then, there's some people in this room old enough, they won't admit it, but there's some that are old enough to remember that when tape machines were put out, they were heavy and they were cumbersome, and they were everything that they eventually turned out not to be. So Mike put this videotape machine on under where he sat at his feet. He's here, I'm here, Joe's there. The game begins. In the first couple of innings, for some unexplained reason to Joe, I would start to laugh. And Joe finally said, off the air, when a commercial break, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "I don't know. It's just a great day. There's not a cloud in the sky. There's no wind. It's a perfect day for a baseball game at Candlestick," which it rarely was. So now we're watching replays of the game on their TV in the game back to Cincinnati. Now we get to the seventh inning. We come out of the commercial break, and I said, "Reds lead the Giants 4-2. Here with the play-by-play is Joe." Joe Morgan gets on first base, tries to steal second. Bang, bang play. Umpire says out. Big uproar occurs. Morgan gets thrown out. Sparky gets thrown out. And we're seeing this replay over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, up on the screen pops a scene from the pornographic movie Deep Throat. Everything stops. Joe stopped talking. He kept elbowing me and pointing at the screen. I got tears running down my face because I know it was coming. He thought that what we were watching on that TV monitor was what you people were watching back here. Another time, same engineer, in every radio booth, there's a speaker that's erected in one of the corners of the booth. That speaker is for the express purpose of the official scorer letting all the broadcasters and the writers know whether a ball in question was a hit or an error. Ground ball hit the shortstop. Shortstop has to take 5 or 6 steps to his left or right, kicks it around, recovers, throws to first, runner is out or safe. Was it an error? And he will tell you that. Well, our engineer goes down to the press box at Candlestick and gets the PA announcer to record in a video cassette recorder. This is how long ago this was. Joe Nuxhall, long distance call for Joe Nuxhall in the main press box. First inning, here it comes. He gets up. I'm doing the play-by-play. He gets up, he goes back, he comes back. We go on a commercial break. I said, "Who the hell is calling you?" I said, "Everybody in the Midwest knows where we are, and they knows that we're working." He said, "I don't know. I went down there. They looked at me like I had 3 heads." He went down there 5 times. And the 5th time he went down there to kick somebody's ass. He was not happy. He only got back at me 1 time. And he was like a kid waking up on Christmas morning. I used to read and still do a lot. It's the thing that I pass time with on the road. I read a lot of novels, and my wife and I both are avid readers of Kindles, and we read an awful lot. And I would read, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sports Illustrated contacted the Reds and said that Joe Nuxhall was unique. He was the only guy in baseball who was a broadcaster and also pitched batting practice. Sports Illustrated wanted to put a writer on us for a weekend at Shea Stadium in New York. And all that person was, responsibility was to follow Joe Nuxhall, be on the field when he pitched batting practice, be in the radio booth. So it was a young junior writer, a lady, and she came and sat in the booth Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. And the first game, I would introduce Joe to do the play-by-play in the 3rd inning, and I'd get my book out. I'd read my book. Bad idea. Very unprofessional. But I would listen to what he's saying. I didn't miss a pitch or anything, but I'm reading a novel. So a month later, the article comes out, and I can't wait to read it. I mean, it's great publicity for the club. And I read the article, and there it is. When Marty introduces Joe to do the play-by-play, he reads a book. I said, this will not end well. Sure enough, I get a call from a young lady by the name of Pat Mulroney, who was Assistant General Manager Dick Wagner's executive secretary. And she said, Mr. Wagner would like to see you in his office this afternoon at 4 o'clock. I said, okay. So I go in there. I walk in. Dick's got this big mic. Dick and I did not get along well to begin with. That's another story. But Dick and I were like this. So I walk in, and I look on it right in front of him. He's got the Sports Illustrated laid out. And I sit down, and he turned the magazine around, and he leaned across, and he said, is this true? I said, yes, it is. He said, let me give you the best piece of advice you've ever had. Don't ever let this happen again. Do you understand? I said, I do. That's the only time I ever agreed with him. He and I fought like dogs. Had he not been fired in 1983, I'd have been history. Anyway, but he had me. I was at a disadvantage, I knew. 2 weeks later, we were in Montreal to play the Expos. Story's over with. It's a dead issue. We get to the 3rd inning of the first game in Montreal. And the engineer cues us coming out of the commercial break, and I said, Reds lead the Expos 5-0. Here with the play-by-play is Joe. And he said, thank you, Marty. Boy, that looks like a good book you're reading. What's the name of that book? If you know anything about hyphenated names, my whole career flashed before me. This is like Brutus. I said, this guy has screwed me so bad. It was all planned. He told the engineer, when there's still 20 seconds left to go in the commercial, kill all the microphones. My mic, his mic, the crowd mic. Nothing comes out of that booth live on the air, and then have him introduce me to do the play. So nobody heard it but me and Joe. And I thought he'd done me in. And you cannot imagine how happy he was. He was thrilled that he finally got a piece of my ass. Last year came, and I had decided, well in advance, I had decided to retire. And a lot of that had to do with when Joe retired, he was physically unable to do a lot of the things that he had wanted to do. And I think it's natural and understandable that when people apply themselves
no matter what walk of life they might be. But if they decide to walk away from it, they want to do it when they can do some things that they've never done before. All my baseball travel had been baseball travel. I mean, there are places in this country I'd never been to before. I'd never been to Europe before, other than to play golf in Scotland and Ireland. I didn't count that. So I decided to retire, and I was concerned, God almighty, I'll be here until 2 a.m. So I made the announcement in January, a year ago. And the three reasons were, one, I wanted to retire when I was healthy. Two, I wanted to retire when I was on top of my game, or I felt like I was on top of my game. And three, that I went out on my own terms. And I did that. And I've never looked back. I know some guys that, Vince Scully and I became probably, who's the greatest baseball announcer who ever lived. If anybody in my profession today thinks there's somebody better, secretly they think they're better. And if they think that, they're clowns, because there's nobody better, and there never will be an announcer better in my profession, in my fraternity, than Vince Scully. And also, he's a guy who has been told every day of his life for probably the last half century that he was the greatest baseball announcer who ever lived, and has no ego. He has none. He's like Joe. Joe had no ego. And so Vinny and I would talk, and he made the comment one day. He said, you know, we're unique because in our profession, we can work as long as we want to work, age-wise, as long as we don't piss off the people who pay us, and the people who listen to us continue to accept our work with a degree of anticipation. But there's also a curse, and that is that a lot of guys work beyond when they were on top of their game because they can. So I heeded that. And I know guys in my business today that still work that should not be. They should have retired a long time ago because they're not nearly as good as they used to be. And so it indeed is a curse. And I was concerned about hanging it up, but I think I got over the hump this spring because I went to spring training, and we're going back we're catching a Delta flight out of here. Amen and I, 6:45 tomorrow morning to fly back to Phoenix. We ain't done with this nice warm weather yet. And so I had people come up to me at the ballpark last week or the week before in Arizona. They'd say, boy, I bet you wish you were still upstairs broadcasting. And I said, no. No, I'm not. And I said, let me tell you the greatest thing I got going about my job right now. And they said, what's that? And I said, I can get up and leave this damn ballpark anytime I want to. I have not seen a game past the fifth inning yet this spring. Get up and leave, you know. I love this game, and I know how people feel about the National Football League and whatever else they want to talk about. And if they can say about the NFL, about this shitty team we have here, that's a shame. But I think this team, the team, if you're a Reds fan, you're going to have a good time in 2020. It is really going to be a good baseball team. The one thing that you can't factor in is the injury factor. And every time I start talking about a team, I say it can be good if. And if this team can stay healthy and their starting rotation is going to be as good as anybody in this league, with the exception of maybe a couple of other teams, and the kind of offense that this team can generate, with the additions of Nick Castellanos and Mike and the Moustakas kid, this is going to be a fun team to watch. And so I know we've all suffered through 5 years of really crappy baseball. And believe it, nobody knows it better than me. This one belongs to the Red stuff. I had to write that on a card to remember to say it when they won games, for God's sake.
And I've said a million times this winter, it's going to be a damn shame that this team would luck up and win a world championship the first year after I retire. Some guy in Denver tweeted it about 5 weeks ago. He said, God almighty, he said, the Reds have signed Moustakas, they've signed Castellanos, they've signed Wade Miley. After Brennaman retires, how much were they paying this damn guy? That's a joke, believe me when I tell you. I think it's going to be fun to watch him play. And you know, I'm not sucking up because I don't suck up. But I think the greatest thing, and I really truly believe this, and this is the best ownership I've ever worked for. And I've been through a lot of ownerships. I mean, from the Nipperts to the Linders, who was the worst owner I've ever worked under, to Marge Schott. It is the way it is. I'm sorry. If you work for Linder, it's too bad. He's a bad owner. This guy here wears his loyalties on his sleeve, and he wants to win, and I don't think he gives a damn about whether he wins in reference to his own legacy. I think he wants to win for the city of Cincinnati. I just think sometimes he becomes too much of a fan, and I've told Bob that. But I really believe that this team has a chance, and I think in 2020 it's really going to be fun to watch this team play baseball because they're going to play an exciting brand. If they stay healthy, they're going to be a major factor in their division and an impact player in the National League. And you know what? At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, we're all front runners. And we will root like hell for a team if they're winning, and we'll jump off that wagon so fast it's a damn shame if they don't. And I'll stand up and be counted I'm one of them. So I think you'll enjoy it. Now, does anybody have any questions? This is the part I enjoy the most. I'll stand up here until the cows come home. Yes, sir, back in the peanut gallery. Talk loud to me. As far as stories of Pete, I can't tell any stories about Pete publicly. There were a period of years when Pete and Joe Morgan and I were really, really close. Can't talk about any of them. Sparky's case, he and Joe were the two guys that were mentors to me. And when Sparky was fired after the 78 season, it was totally unexpected. I certainly didn't expect it. I mean, I knew everything that was going on in the organization because Sparky would take me under his wing. He would tell me about trades that were going to be made, and I never broke his confidence, and he knew he could tell me everything and know that I was not going to run out and tell everybody. And there was a rumor in November of 78 that the Reds were going to make a trade for an outfielder with the LA Dodgers named Lee Lacy. And they had called a news conference for the next day. So I called Sparky that night, and I said, he lived in Thousand Oaks, California. And I said, you know, the news conference is tomorrow. Is this about Lee Lacy? And he hesitated, and he said, I can't tell you. And I said, what do you mean you can't tell me? I said, you tell me everything. He said, I'll tell you what. After the news conference is over, you call me in the morning, and we'll talk as long as you want to talk. And I hung up the phone, and I told my wife, I said, he's been fired. And she said, why would you say that? I said, because he has never in 5 years said to me, I can't tell you. So I'm driving down the ballpark that morning, and WLW radio breaks the story before the news conference that he had been fired. And the Reds had a director of player development named Chief Bender, and he and Sparky were like that too. And the news conference had been announced that Sparky had been fired and John McNamara had been named the manager of the club. And I went into Chief Bender's office and I broke down and cried. I had not had anybody that I was that close to on a business level and for many reasons, personal level, that had been fired. And it really shook me up. And he was a great manager. He was an underrated manager. I used to hear people say, hell, anybody could manage that club with Bench and Rose and Morgan and Perez and Griffey and Geronimo and Concepcion. And
blah, blah, blah. I said, you got to be kidding me. I mean, Pete didn't like Bench, and Bench didn't like Pete. Nobody manipulated a pitching staff better than Sparky Anderson did. He was a great manager, and he proved that when he then went to Detroit and won a world championship in 1984. So he was a great person. He was one of the truly great people I've ever known in my life. Question? Yes, sir.
Was every game really a titanic struggle?
Every damn game I ever broadcast was a titanic struggle. I had people say to me, where'd that come from? I said, that's the mad meanderings of a left-hander. I have no idea where that came from, but it just caught on, so I said it, you know. A little different. Question? Todd, you're doing your best Phil Donahue impersonation, man.
By the way, get it up for Todd. Todd.
Give it up for Todd Moore.
So the time you begged Tom Browning to come back to the stadium when his kid was being born.
Say that again?
When you begged Tom Browning to come back to the stadium when his kid was being born.
That was one of the most bizarre, that might be the single most bizarre thing that had ever happened to me. This was game 2 of the World Series in 1990. I think Jack Buck and Tim McCarver were doing the national telecast. Oakland's broadcasters were there. Joe and I were doing the game. And now the game gets tied up. And it's obviously going to extra innings. Tom Browning is due to start game 3 in Oakland. We're off tomorrow. We're going to go to Oakland. Browning will start game 3. We get a call. Our engineer says, Dave Armbruster, who's our spiritual leader and mentor and was with me for about 30 years, he said, we just got a call from the Reds clubhouse to put out a public appeal for Tom Browning to come back to Riverfront Stadium. Tom Browning's wife, Debbie, was in labor, and she was getting ready to deliver a baby in northern Kentucky. And Browning was pitching the next day. We had tomorrow off to go to Oakland, so there was no reason to keep him there. And I thought somebody was pulling a prank. And he said, no, this is legitimate. This is a direct message or request from Lou Piniella to send out, well, I did it. Tim McCarver did it on NBC, and Browning was sitting in the waiting room while Debbie was in labor to deliver a baby, and Browning was in uniform. He left the ballpark because he found out during the game that Debbie had gone into labor. And so he left the hospital to come back to the ballpark, and before we got back there, Joe Oliver had the base hit off Dennis Eckersley to win the game, and it was a moot point. But it was a strange, I don't know that anybody in the history of my business has ever put out a public request for a guy to come back to the ballpark because his wife was getting ready to deliver a baby. I never heard that before. Question? Yes, sir.
Marty, did you really like the banana phone?
I hated the banana phone. Most of the time, it was young guys that were drunk. What are you throwing your damn hands up for? Did you do it? And they would ask stupid questions, and they would leave the radio on so they could hear themselves. And then it would cause feedback. And see, Paul Doherty loved it. It was so bad. And the thing finally ended. I'm going to be dead honest with you about this. We're playing the Pittsburgh Pirates. We had a rain delay, and this guy calls, and he said, Marty, Andrew McCutchen straps his penis to his leg before every game. Are there Reds players who do that? Now, wait a minute. We have a fail-safe situation like that just because of questions like that. And that is a 7-second delay. But when the dumbass radio announcer says, because he's shocked, what did you say? 7 seconds goes away and he says it again. And I said then, we're done with this. Now I'm going to tell the rest of the story. I get a call a couple of days later from Mary Briggs, who is Bob Castellitti's executive secretary, and she says, Bob wants to reinitiate the banana phone. Now I lose my mind. I said, where the hell did this come from? She said, well, he had lunch with Paul Daugherty. Am I right? And Doc thought this was the greatest thing in the history of radio. And I said, this will not come to pass. It will not happen. I called Bob and I said, you got a choice. You can find somebody else to do these games, or you can buy into the fact that I will not take another call on the banana phone. The banana phone died at that moment. And I always thanked you, Doc, for all the help I got from you.
Okay. You mentioned Vin Scully as the best announcer.
Yes, ma'am.
Where do you place Wade Hoyt?
Well, you know, I never listened to Wade Hoyt.
Well, I grew up sitting outside with my dad listening to Wade Hoyt broadcast. When it came over ticker tape, he wasn't even at the park. And if they had a rain delay, this man could mesmerize you for an hour, hour and a half. I mean, I was eat up with mosquito bites by the time I went in and told my mom, I can't sit out there anymore, I'm itching. But I thought he was one of the greatest announcers in the history of baseball.
I've got the records. Wade Hoyt and the rain, they're the coolest things in the world.
He was
and he was a great man. He took me under his wing when I came. He used to tell me personally about the Yankees, the story of the Yankees of the 20s when he played with Gehrig and Ruth and that bunch. And he was a very, very nice man. He really was.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for remembering him. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Marty, outside of the Reds, who was your favorite player ever that you watched play?
I tell you, I was a big fan of Willie Stargell. Willie and I were good friends. He was a guy who, you know, he was part of the great Pittsburgh Pirate ball clubs that won the World Series in 1979. He carried himself with such stateliness, had a certain aura about him, was a very gentle giant, a very quiet guy, a very articulate guy. He had great ability. And the other guy was Dave Parker. I mean, I was a big fan of Dave Parker. I mean, and the years that he gave to this club after he had left the Pirates and came to Cincinnati for whatever it was, 3 or 4 years in the 80s, and very productive years. I think Dave Parker should be in the Hall of Fame. You know. But and let me tell you something. Now I'm going to get on my soapbox now. The guys that vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame or the Baseball Writers Association of America, that's the biggest jack-off organization that ever been. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there are guys that hold personal grudges. When it comes time to vote, and that's a blanket indictment, and that's not fair. There are individuals in that organization that because Steve Carlton failed to give them an interview in 1973, and his name came up to be in the Hall of Fame, we're not going to vote for him because he hurt my feelings. They won't let broadcasters in. And across the board, we see more baseball from the beginning of a season until the end of a season that 95% of the writers see. Yet they won't let us in. And so Dave Parker is a victim of his own doing, but so is Pete. And if we're going to live in a country that is so forgiving that we will forgive a president for having sex in the White House, and we can't forgive Dave Parker for being involved in a drug scandal
in the late 70s or Pete for betting on the game and turned the page and let two guys who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame based on their careers, something is wrong with that.
Marty, I appreciate it. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to take a second and tell you something from somebody standing here as just a normal person and somebody that grew up in their grandparents' house and listened to you broadcasting games every day and every night. For somebody like me, you personally shaped the game of baseball, whether you may think that or not, and I just appreciate the shit out of you for it and wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Marty.
Yeah, where are we?
Over here to your left.
Got you covered, biggin. Cheers.
Do you have a story you might be able to tell us about Marg's shot?
I do. I've been waiting all night for somebody to ask me that. In 1987, we played an afternoon game against the San Diego Padres at Riverfront. That night, the World Wrestling Federation was wrestling at the Coliseum. And my daughter Ashley was 7 years old at the time, and she would religiously watch professional wrestling on television. So I had a buddy of mine who had an executive job with a World Wrestling, it's not called that anymore. I don't even know World Wrestling Entertainment or whatever it is. But it was World Wrestling Federation. He called me and he said, hey, we're going to be at Riverfront Stadium. This is 3 weeks before. Would you like tickets for you and your daughter? I said, I'd love to. So then a day before they came in, and we were playing an afternoon game against the Padres on that Thursday, he called me and he said, would you like to have Randy Savage, the Macho Man, in the radio booth that Thursday? I said, damn right. I said, that would be the best. And so I'm already, they're wrestling that night, but it's after the whole day off for Savage and all the rest of those guys. And I anticipated he would come into the booth with a body shirt on and jeans and sneakers. He walks into that booth, he looked like a mutant canary. He had a blazing yellow cowboy hat on. Everything else from his neck down was yellow with a cape and the whole 9 yards. And he comes into the radio booth. He sits between me and Joe. And I'm trying to get him to talk baseball because he played in the Reds farm system. His name was Randy Poffo. Played a year or two with the Reds and a year or two with the Cardinals. And 1 year with the Tampa Tarpons, he had 17 home runs in the Florida State League, which is a hell of a number because that was a league that had big ballparks in Florida. His given name was Randy Poffo. He would not break character. He was the macho man. He talked in that guttural way he talked. But we had a great time. And the players, the whole stadium was taken with it when they found out we were talking to him. In fact, Eric Davis came out from underneath the dugout roof and he flexed his muscles and did all this. Well, now, during the interview, Marge had a nephew named Steve Schott. Never mind. Steve was one of those guys that he was a proponent of the federal law that was passed about eating 17 meals a day. And so in the course of our interview, I looked over where our engineer was sitting, Dave Armbruster, and Steve was in there, and he was animatedly talking to Yid. That's what we call our engineer. So the interview ends, and during a commercial break, Yid says to me, I got to tell you what Steve said. I said, what's that? He said, he came in here, he wanted the interview to end, and he told me if I don't interview this interview, I'm going to get Marty Brennaman's job. I said, really? And we come back, it's the fifth inning. I'm supposed to be doing the play-by-play. I told Joe, I said, Joe, go ahead, you take the mic. I got to do something. So I got up and I went out in the hallway. And as fate would have it, here comes Steve. And I said, we need to talk.
We walk across into another room, and I said, let me tell you something. You can do a lot of things. Do not ever threaten me with my job because you can't get it. And I said, the best thing you can do is stay the hell away from me. And he started crying. He said, you don't understand. I have to deal with Mrs. Schott. I said, Steve, I don't give a damn about what you have to do. I said, you sit behind your desk and you have a bowl of M&Ms and you separate them by color, for God's sake. You not tell me about your problem with Mrs. Schott. So now we get to the ninth inning, and Jim Ferguson, who's the Reds media relations director, he comes into the booth, and he said, Mrs. Schott told me to come up here and tell you that she wants to see you in her office, you and Joe, when the game's over. I felt bad as hell for Joe because every time Joe got thrown into something, it was because of me. So we go into Marge's office, and I think every employee in the Reds organization was in there. And we go in there, we sit down, and I'm here, and Joe's here, and Steve Schott's sitting over here. Marge starts raising hell about having Randy Savage in the booth, and the only reason Marge raised hell about it was because it was not her idea. Had it been her idea, it would have been fine. I said, Marge, this is family entertainment. I take my 7-year-old there. We sit on the first row. I take her backstage. She meets all these guys. They are as normal as the day is long. And then old Steve has to pipe up, and he said, Marge, at one point during that interview, I thought I was going to have to get physical. And I turned to him and I said, Steve, Randy Savage would have pinched your damn head off. Why don't you shut up? And Marge said, that's right, Steve, shut up. That's my Marge Schott story. Yeah.
All right, I do have a question.
You want me to tell that Jim Bowden story?
No.
Okay.
I do have a question, but first I want to say, this guy, I love this guy because he's a lot like me. He don't give a shit what he says. He says what he feels, and I respect the hell out of that. And I'll get to my question in 1 minute.
We have a mutual admiration society, Ron.
But you know what? You got. My song is you got to stand for something, and you'll fall for everything. And Marty's like that. He doesn't care. We have opinions. We give you our opinions, whether you like it or not. It's up to you, but it's our opinion. And he's not afraid. You know what? He came down the clubhouse. He would talk about people. I agree with him 90% of the time.
He didn't agree with me a lot.
Not all the time, 90%. The same as Paul Doherty. I love listening or reading his stuff. I don't agree with him, but I respect these guys. But he would come down. He would say stuff on the radio like Ken Griffey Jr., what he said. But he would be down in the clubhouse. If anybody had a problem with him, here I am. You know, my question is, how did you not get your ass kicked for 40-some years or 50-some years?
I got to tell you something. Now, there's a story behind that because when I announced I was going to retire, and I heard from a lot of people, and it was a very touching thing because I know when Johnny Bench told me when I went into the Baseball Hall of Fame, he said, this is before cell phones or social media. He said, get a legal pad and write down all the names of the people that you hear from. He said, because they're the people that care about you. The guys that don't give a damn about you or don't think that you should be there, they're not going to waste the time to say anything. And Johnny was right. I did that. And Ron was right. When one of the things that I tell people all the time, one of the text messages that I got was a very touching one from Ron Oster. And at the end of it, he said, the most amazing thing to me is that somebody did not kick your ass. And there were only a handful of players. There were only a handful of players that ever said anything to me. And like Ron said, if you're going to do it, you got to show up. You got to be there every day. You got to walk through that clubhouse every day. So if you said something on the air one night that a guy did not like, you can't hide behind the microphone. And there are guys in my profession that are very famous for that. They will never show up at the ballpark so they can say anything they want to because they're not going to get any feedback from it. And so I I used to tell guys, this ain't no barbershop. You ain't got to stand in line. If you got something you want to say to me, you say it to me. And I remember Eric Davis, who's one of my favorite players. One night in a 1-1 game at Riverfront, he led off the ninth inning. He hit a ball down the right field line that was a base hit, and he tried to stretch it into a double. And the right fielder got to the ball, cut it off, and threw him out at second. And I beat him up a little bit. Now, you can't make that out, especially when you have the kind of speed that Eric Davis has. So the next day I go through the clubhouse, and he comes up to me in the middle of the clubhouse in a very calm manner. And we talk about it, and I express my opinion. He expressed his opinion. I said, finally, we are never going to agree. But you're right or I was right. So we just call it a draw. He turned the page, next day it's like it never happened again. And so they are the kind of guys that I respected. I respected the guys that would challenge me rather than say bad things about me behind my back. Because God knows what I said was about as public as it can be stated. I'm going into 7 states on the radio when I say something. You're my man, oh. You're my man. Am I done?
Yeah.
I'd be here all night now if you all
know-
have to go to work tomorrow. And Amanda, I only got to catch a plane at 6:45, right, Amanda? I want to thank Todd Moore. I want to thank you folks. I've been to all of them in the city of Cincinnati. There's no one better than this event right here. Believe me when I tell you that. Thank you very much. Thank you.